A baby was crying, not behind palace walls, not inside a mother's arms, but beneath the shattered altar of an ancient moon shrine where thousands had fallen before dawn. By sunrise, Alpha King Nolan Blackthorne would have to decide whether to leave the abandoned infant behind or carry the child back to a kingdom that would almost certainly demand the baby's death. If he chose mercy, the crown itself could turn against him before nightfall. Before this unforgettable journey begins, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you are listening from in the comments below. Your support helps bring more epic werewolf romance stories to listeners around the world. Smoke drifted across the ruined battlefield. Broken banners lay beneath cracked stone, the scent of rain mixed with ash and fading wolf magic. Nolan followed the faint cries until he reached the collapsed moon shrine. There, wrapped inside a worn blue blanket, lay a tiny infant. The baby looked up at him, silent, unafraid. Pale crescent-shaped birthmark shimmered softly upon the child's chest before fading beneath the first rays of morning. Nolan gently lifted the infant into his arms. "You are not alone anymore." Behind him, his beta inhaled sharply. "Your Majesty, the Council will never allow this." Nolan looked once more at the ruined shrine, then at the child peacefully falling asleep against his armor. They can argue with their king. He turned toward the capital. "I am taking my son home." The palace welcomed victorious soldiers with ringing bells. It welcomed the infant with silence. No celebration marked the child's arrival. No royal herald announced his name. No noble stepped forward with a blessing. Instead, whispers followed the tiny blue blanket through every marble corridor. A battlefield child, a curse, a burden. They should have left him where he was found. Nolan heard every word. He answered none of them. The infant slept peacefully in his arms, unaware that his first battle had begun long before he could walk. 3 days later, the royal council assembled beneath the Hall of Ancestors. Every seat was occupied. Every noble house had sent representatives. At the center of the chamber stood Lord Varric Ashfang, elegant, cold, patient. He looked toward the sleeping infant beside Nolan. "Your Majesty, no one questions your compassion. But compassion cannot replace law." He slowly opened an ancient royal record. For centuries, abandoned children discovered upon battlefields have been surrendered to the Moon Tribunal until their bloodline is verified. He closed the book. "The kingdom has procedures." Nolan remained seated upon the throne. "The child stays." Lady Selene Crowmore stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if his family truly perished, he deserves care. But not within the palace. The people will question your judgment." Nolan looked toward the infant. The baby had wrapped one tiny hand around his finger. Such a small gesture, yet somehow it carried more certainty than every speech inside the chamber. "I did not ask for permission," he said quietly. "I informed you of my decision." The council dissolved into uneasy silence. Only one person never spoke. Ilara Moonvale. The palace healer stood near the chamber entrance, carrying a basket filled with fresh herbs. She had examined the child shortly after his arrival. She alone had seen the pale crescent birthmark hidden beneath the tiny blue blanket. She alone recognized it, the mark of the first moon, an emblem believed extinct for nearly 400 years. She lowered her eyes, not because she feared the truth, because speaking it too soon would condemn the child. That night, Ilara carried warm milk into the royal nursery. The infant watched her quietly. His blue-gray eyes reflected moonlight streaming through the window, so, she whispered gently, "You survived." The baby smiled. A tiny hand reached toward the silver moon pendant resting around her neck. The pendant became warm. Ilara closed her eyes. The old stories were true. She quickly pulled the curtains shut. No one else could see the faint silver glow surrounding the child. Far beneath the palace, ancient stones answered with a single pulse of light. The forgotten moon sanctuary had awakened. No guard noticed. No scholar recorded it. Only the oldest magic remembered. Weeks became months. Months became years. The little boy received a name. Kalen. Nolan refused every suggestion to choose a more politically acceptable title. He already has one, the king insisted. Kalen Blackthorne. The announcement unsettled the court. Many believed the king had grown too attached. They were right. Every morning before attending council meetings, Nolan visited the nursery. He learned how to prepare bottles. He learned how to calm nightmares. He learned that tiny footsteps running toward him after difficult days somehow erased the weight of an entire kingdom. Kalen never called him father. He simply smiled whenever Nolan entered the room. That was enough. Outside the nursery, life proved less gentle. Other noble children often refused to play with him. One afternoon, a young aristocrat pointed directly at Kalen. "My father says you do not belong here." The courtyard fell silent. Kalen lowered his head. "I did not ask to come," before another cruel word could follow. "Vivian." No, not Vivian. Ilara stepped between them. She corrected herself with a quiet smile. She knelt beside Kalen. "Do you know what the strongest trees have in common?" He shook his head. "They begin as seeds nobody notices." The boy looked at her. "Will I become strong?" "You already are. Because you chose kindness instead of anger." The other children slowly drifted away. Kalen never chased them. He never complained. Instead, he spent his afternoons helping stable workers feed abandoned wolf pups rescued after border skirmishes. He brushed their fur, shared his lunch, read stories aloud, although the tiny animals could not understand the words. Ilara watched from a distance. "The blood remembers," she whispered. "Not power, not conquest, compassion." One winter evening, a violent snowstorm trapped travelers inside the palace. Among them was an elderly storyteller from the eastern mountains. He noticed Kalen quietly wrapping blankets around shivering children before covering himself. The old man smiled. "You remind me of someone." Kalen looked curious. "Who?" "A king from a prophecy." Before he could explain further, royal guards escorted him away to warmer quarters. The conversation ended, but not before Ilara heard every word. Later that night, she descended alone into the palace archives. Hidden beneath the oldest shelves rested a stone box sealed with faded moon runes. Inside lay a weathered parchment. Its edges had nearly turned to dust. Across the top were written ancient words no longer spoken in ordinary kingdoms. "When the child of the first moon returns, the mark shall awaken upon both father and son beneath the ancient lunar eclipse. Only then shall the forgotten bloodline stand revealed." Ilara carefully rolled the scroll closed. "So the day is coming," she whispered. "And when it arrives, the entire world will come looking for him." She replaced the box exactly where she had found it. No one could know, not yet. Above her, Kalen slept peacefully beneath the same worn blue blanket that had wrapped him inside the ruined shrine years earlier. Outside his bedroom window, the full moon disappeared briefly behind dark clouds, then emerged again. For just an instant, the pale crescent mark upon the sleeping boy's chest shimmered with soft silver light. Far beyond the kingdom's borders, inside a fortress carved into black mountains, Lord Varric Ashfang stood before an ancient obsidian mirror. The surface suddenly glowed. A silver crescent appeared within the darkness. his face hardened. So, the first moon bloodline lives. He slowly turned toward General Darius Stoneclaw. Prepare our riders. The child has been hidden long enough. The hunt had begun. 10 years passed. The kingdom no longer questioned whether Kaelin belonged inside the palace. They questioned why the Alpha King loved him, as though the boy carried his own blood. No answer ever came. Not from Nolan, not from Alara, and certainly not from the frightened nobles who had slowly learned that criticizing the child within the king's hearing was a dangerous mistake. Kaelin grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy. He preferred the palace gardens to the training grounds. While young nobles competed to prove who was strongest, Kaelin helped the elderly gardeners restore forgotten moonflowers that bloomed only beneath silver light. He repaired broken bird nests, fed abandoned wolf cubs rescued from the frontier, read stories to children whose parents served along the borders. Every act reminded Nolan of something he could never explain. Looking at the boy felt strangely familiar. Not because of appearance, because of instinct. Every time danger approached, his heart reacted before his mind did. One autumn evening, the Royal Observatory announced extraordinary news. The Ancient Lunar Eclipse returns. The elderly astronomer bowed before the throne. It has not appeared for nearly 3 centuries. Every noble considered the event a magnificent celebration. Only Alara turned pale. Her fingers tightened around the silver pendant resting against her chest. The prophecy, the time had finally arrived. That night, she entered the forgotten moon sanctuary hidden beneath the palace. Ancient stone wolves lined the circular chamber. At its center rested a silver altar illuminated by moonlight filtering through cracks in the ceiling. The old healer knelt. "I have kept my promise," she whispered. "I protected the child, but I cannot protect him from destiny," the sanctuary answered. Soft silver light flowed across the ancient floor. Runes dormant for centuries awakened one after another. A single sentence slowly appeared across the altar. Truth cannot remain hidden beneath the same moon forever. Alara closed her eyes. So it begins. 3 nights later, the kingdom gathered upon the royal moon terrace. Thousands of wolves filled the courtyards. Children laughed. Musicians played ancient melodies. Priests prepared blessings beneath towering silver banners. High above them, the full moon slowly darkened. The eclipse had begun. Marcus, no. Nolan stood beside Kaelin overlooking the celebration below. "You have grown," he said quietly. Kaelin smiled. "Only because you never stopped believing I could." The words settled deep inside Nolan's heart. He placed one hand gently upon the boy's shoulder. "I should be thanking you." Kaelin looked surprised. "For what?" "For reminding this palace that kindness belongs here." Before Kaelin could answer, a strange warmth spread beneath his shirt. He frowned. "My chest." The warmth became light, silver, soft at first, then brilliant. The crescent-shaped birthmark upon his chest began glowing through the fabric of his tunic. Gasps echoed across the terrace. Every eye turned toward the boy. "What is happening?" one elder whispered. Alara stepped forward instinctively. "No," her voice trembled. "It is too soon." Then, Nolan staggered backward. A burning sensation spread across his own chest. He gripped the stone railing. Golden eyes widened in disbelief. The pain disappeared as suddenly as it had begun. In its place, silver light burst through his royal armor. The exact same crescent mark appeared over his heart. The entire terrace fell silent. The 2 glowing symbols pulsed together. One heartbeat, then another, then perfectly as one, the moon above reached total eclipse. Silver light poured across father and son. An invisible force swept through the palace. Every wolf instinctively lowered its head, not from fear, from recognition. Nolan looked at Kaelin. The boy looked back. Neither understood. Yet both felt it. Something ancient had awakened. A deep vibration resonated inside Nolan's soul. His wolf slowly lifted its head, not with the fierce roar of battle, with a low, ancient, protective purr. It echoed through every heartbeat. Mine. The single word filled Nolan's entire being, not possession, belonging, family. Kaelin suddenly pressed one hand against his chest. I can hear him. Nolan stepped closer. Hear who? Your wolf. The boy's voice remained calm. He sounds happy. No child without an ancient blood bond should have been able to hear another Alpha's wolf. The elders knew it. Elara knew it. The nobles knew enough to become afraid. Lady Selene slowly backed away. This cannot happen. Lord Varric's spies, hidden among the crowd, quietly slipped toward the palace gates. The signal had been given. Elara could remain silent no longer. She walked into the center of the terrace. Tears shimmered beneath the moonlight. Your Majesty, Nolan turned toward her. What do you know? She lowered herself to one knee. Everything. Silence. I found him, she whispered. Not on the day you discovered him. My king. I placed him inside the ruined shrine before you ever arrived. Shock spread across every face. Nolan stared at her. You what? Elara's voice broke. There was no abandoned battlefield, child. There never was. Years of carefully guarded truth collapsed in a single breath. 10 years ago, a secret faction inside the royal court ordered the extermination of every newborn carrying the first moon bloodline. They believed the ancient prophecy threatened their power. I escaped with one infant. She looked toward Kaelin. I wrapped inside the blue blanket. I hid him beneath the moon shrine. I prayed destiny would send the one person capable of protecting him. Her eyes filled with tears, and it did. Nolan struggled to speak. You knew? All these years? I did. Then tell me. His voice cracked. Who is he? Elara met his eyes. Not as healer, not as servant, as the keeper of one final truth. He is not an orphan. The silver marks flared brighter. The eclipse reached its darkest moment. The entire palace seemed to hold its breath. Elara whispered the words that changed history forever. He is your son. Silence shattered the world. Nolan looked toward Kaelin. The boy stood frozen. Neither spoke, neither moved. Then, without understanding why, Kaelin slowly reached for Nolan's hand. The moment their fingers touched, the glowing moon marks united. Silver light exploded across the royal terrace. Ancient wolf spirits appeared briefly within the moonlit sky. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Every spectral guardian lowered its head toward the Alpha King, and the child beside him, far beyond the palace, inside the obsidian fortress. Lord Varric watched the eclipse through a black crystal. The same silver light reflected across his face. His expression darkened. So, the prophecy has chosen its king. He turned sharply toward General Darius Stoneclaw. Gather every loyal warrior. Ride before dawn, this time. We do not capture the boy. We erase the bloodline forever. The eclipse had not yet ended. Silver light still covered the royal terrace. No one moved. No one breathed. The impossible truth echoed louder than any battle cry. The abandoned child was the Alpha King's son. A low growl rolled through the gathered wolves, not from anger, from instinct. Every wolf present could feel the ancient bloodline awakening. Nolan looked down at the glowing crescent mark upon his chest, then at the identical mark shining upon Kaelin. His voice barely rose above a whisper. My son. The words felt unfamiliar, yet they also felt as though they had waited an entire lifetime to be spoken. Kaelin stared back at him. He struggled to breathe. I always wondered why being near you felt like home. Nolan reached toward him. His trembling hand rested gently upon the boy's shoulder. You never needed to earn your place. You already belonged. For one brief moment, the palace forgot politics, forgot prophecy, forgot fear. Then, a deafening explosion shattered the eastern gate. Stone erupted into the sky. Smoke swallowed the moonlight. War horns screamed across the capital. Royal guards drew their swords. The palace is under attack! Another explosion, then another. The outer walls shook violently. General Darius Stoneclaw marched through the ruined gateway at the head of hundreds of armored extremists. Behind him walked Lord Varric Ashfang, calm, elegant, smiling. His crimson cloak barely stirred despite the chaos surrounding him. So, he said softly, the prophecy survived after all. His cold eyes settled upon Kaelin. There is the boy. Several frightened nobles instinctively stepped away from the child. Lady Selene pointed toward Kaelin. He is the curse. He brought this upon us, before anyone else could speak. Nolan stepped between them. No, his voice carried through the shattered courtyard. I brought him here. If blame belongs anywhere, it belongs to me, Varric laughed. How noble. You still believe this is about guilt. He slowly unsheathed an ancient black sword. It is about survival. He raised the blade toward the gathered rulers. The first moon bloodline will replace every Alpha dynasty. It will end every royal house represented here. Fear spread through the nobles. Whispers erupted. What if he is right? The prophecy, the kingdoms, Varric smiled. Doubt. It has always been easier to command than loyalty. He extended one hand toward Kaelin. Give me the boy, and your kingdoms may survive. Silence. Nolan answered with one word. No. General Darius lifted his warhammer. Advance! Hundreds of soldiers charged. The royal guards surged forward to intercept them. Steel crashed against steel. The palace courtyard exploded into battle. Children screamed. Servants fled. Moonlight reflected from flashing blades. Kaelin instinctively stepped backward. Nolan immediately turned. Stay behind me. But no. The Alpha King's voice remained calm. I lost 10 years. I will not lose another minute. Those words reached every heart within the courtyard, including Alara's. Tears slipped quietly down her face. This, she whispered. This is why I chose him. The extremists broke through the first defensive line. General Darius charged directly toward Kaelin. His hammer glowed with forbidden crimson runes. Die, Moonchild! He swung. The weapon never reached its target. Nolan caught the enormous hammer with one bare hand. The impact cracked the marble beneath his feet. Shock rippled across the battlefield. General Darius stared. No Alpha should possess that strength. Nolan slowly lifted his eyes. You are correct. Golden light erupted from within him. Not ordinary Alpha power, something older, something awakened by blood. The crescent mark blazed like living silver. Ancient runes spread across his armor. The air itself trembled. His wolf emerged, not in flesh, in spirit. A colossal silver wolf towered behind the Alpha King. Its fur shimmered like moonlit snow. Its eyes contained neither hatred nor rage, only absolute protection. Every wolf in the courtyard froze. Instinct overwhelmed training. One after another. Royal wolves, enemy wolves, Even wild wolves beyond the palace walls lowered their heads. General Darius tried to move, his legs refused. "What is this?" Ilara stepped forward. "The guardian of the first moon. It bows to no crown. It protects only family." Lord Varric's smile finally disappeared. This was never supposed to happen. He raised his black sword. "Kill them!" None of his wolves obeyed. Instead, they slowly retreated from Kaelin. The child looked up at the enormous spectral guardian. It lowered its massive head toward him. Kaelin hesitated, then gently placed one small hand against its glowing muzzle. The giant wolf closed its eyes peacefully. A warm pulse of silver light spread across the courtyard. Every frightened child immediately stopped crying. Every wounded wolf became calm. The battlefield itself seemed to breathe. Varric roared. "No!" He sprinted forward himself. Black magic erupted around his blade. He drove it directly toward Kaelin's heart. Nolan moved first, not as a king, as a father. He placed himself between the sword and the child. The blade struck his shoulder. Blood stained his black armor. The courtyard gasped. Kaelin's eyes widened. "Father!" It was the first time he had ever spoken the word. Nolan smiled, despite the pain. "I heard you." Those 3 words shattered the last barrier inside the boy's heart. The crescent mark upon Kaelin's chest exploded with radiant moonlight. The same light answered from Nolan, father, son. One heartbeat, one bloodline, one destiny. The 2 silver marks connected through a brilliant beam of living light. The entire palace shook. Ancient statues surrounding the courtyard awakened. Stone wolves lining the royal gardens stepped forward. Not alive, not dead, guardians. They surrounded Nolan and Kaelin in complete silence. Every ancient wolf faced the invaders. None faced the royal family. Varric stumbled backward. The legends, they were real. Kingdom after kingdom watched in stunned silence. The oldest Alpha King slowly removed his crown, then another, then another. Within moments, every visiting ruler stood with uncovered heads before Nolan and Kaelin, not in surrender, in recognition. King Aldrich of Frostpeak stepped forward. The prophecy never promised conquest. He looked toward the frightened child. It promised restoration. Queen Lyanna Moonriver drew her sword. She planted it into the marble beside Nolan. "My kingdom stands with the rightful heir." Another ruler followed. Then another, then another. Within seconds, dozens of royal blades stood planted around the father and son. A circle of loyalty, a promise. Lord Varric looked around desperately. His army had stopped fighting. His allies had lowered their weapons. His conspiracy had collapsed beneath one undeniable truth. A father had chosen his child over his throne, and every kingdom had witnessed it. Royal guards surrounded the remaining extremists. No one resisted. General Darius slowly released his hammer. "It is over." Nolan looked toward him. "Yes, it is." He did not order an execution. He did not seek revenge. Justice would come. Hatred would not. Above the palace, the eclipse slowly ended. The first full rays of moonlight bathed Nolan and Kaelin together. For the first time since the forgotten prophecy had been written, the father of the first moon stood beside his son, and neither of them stood alone. The battlefield had fallen silent, not because every enemy had been defeated, because every heart present had witnessed something greater than victory. The Alpha King had chosen his son over his crown. Moonlight washed across the shattered palace courtyard. Broken weapons rested among fractured stone. The ancient stone wolves stood motionless once more, their duty fulfilled. The silver light surrounding Nolan and Kaelin slowly faded. Only the matching crescent marks upon their chests continued to glow softly. Royal guards escorted the remaining extremists into chains. No cheers followed. No celebration erupted. Justice deserved dignity, not triumph. Kalen looked at the blood running down Nolan's shoulder. His face turned pale. "You are hurt." Nolan glanced at the wound. "It is only a scratch." "It is not." The boy stepped closer. His voice trembled. "You stood in front of me." "I always would." The answer came without hesitation, without thought, as though it had always existed. Kalen stared at him. For 10 years, he had wondered what it might feel like to belong to someone. Now, he finally knew. Ilara approached quietly, carrying fresh bandages. She carefully cleaned Nolan's shoulder. The king never looked away from the boy. Instead, he smiled. "I should have found you sooner." Kalen shook his head. "You did. You came when I needed you." Those words pierced Nolan's heart more deeply than any blade. He slowly removed one black leather glove, then gently reached toward the child. His hand rested against Kalen's cheek. "I was supposed to protect you from the beginning. I failed." Kalen placed his smaller hand over Nolan's. "You never stopped. You just did not know." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, the Alpha King did something no ruler present expected. Still covered in blood, still wearing cracked royal armor, Nolan slowly lowered himself onto both knees before the boy. An audible gasp spread across the courtyard. Kings did not kneel, especially not before children. Nolan looked directly into Kalen's eyes. His own were filled with tears. "I cannot return the birthdays I missed. I cannot return the stories I never read. I cannot return the nights you slept without knowing your father." His voice broke. "I cannot erase the years stolen from us." A tear slipped down his face. "But if there is still room in your heart, allow me to spend the rest of my life becoming the father you deserved from the beginning." The courtyard remained perfectly silent. Kalen's lips trembled. He threw his arms around Nolan's neck. "You already are." The Alpha King embraced his son, not as a monarch, not as the chosen guardian of an ancient prophecy, simply as a father. Around them, even hardened warriors quietly wiped tears from their eyes. King Aldrich of Frostpeak lowered his head respectfully. "There has never been a greater victory than this." Queen Lyanna Moonriver smiled gently. The prophecy did not restore a bloodline. It restored a family. Nearby, Lord Varric Ashfang stood bound in enchanted silver chains for the first time in decades. Fear had replaced arrogance. He looked toward Nolan. "You think this changes history?" Nolan slowly rose to his feet. "It already has." The royal council gathered around the prisoners. Elder Garen, keeper of the ancient laws, unrolled the scroll of moon justice. His voice echoed across the palace. "Lord Varric Ashfang, you ordered the extermination of innocent children. You manipulated kingdoms through fear. You betrayed your crown. You attempted to erase the first moon bloodline." He closed the scroll. "How do you answer?" Varric lifted his chin. "I protected the future." "No," Nolan answered quietly. "You protected your power. The future was standing behind me." He looked toward Kalen. "And you tried to murder him." The elder nodded solemnly. "By unanimous judgment of the allied crowns. Lord Varric Ashfang is stripped forever of title, lands, command, and inheritance. He shall spend the remainder of his life imprisoned within the Moon Bastion, where no ambition can ever threaten another child." Varric finally lowered his eyes. He offered no defense, only silence. Next came General Darius Stoneclaw. The towering warrior stepped forward willingly. He placed his warhammer upon the broken marble. I obeyed evil because I believed loyalty mattered more than conscience." He looked toward Kaelin. "I was wrong." Elder Garen considered him carefully. "You surrendered when the truth became clear. You chose not to strike again." He nodded once. "You shall rebuild every village your campaigns destroyed. You will protect the children whose future you once endangered." Darius bowed deeply. "I accept." Just had spoken. Not through vengeance, through responsibility. As the council dispersed, Ilara quietly approached Nolan and Kaelin. She carried the faded blue blanket that had wrapped the infant 10 years earlier. "I kept this," she whispered, "in case the day ever came." She placed it gently into Nolan's hands. The Alpha King unfolded the worn fabric. Small tears marked its edges. Time had faded its color, but one tiny embroidered crescent remained untouched. He smiled through fresh tears. "This was the first home my son ever knew." Kaelin rested his head against Nolan's shoulder. "And now, I have another." Above them, the clouds slowly parted. The full moon shone brighter than ever before. Its silver light fell equally upon the king, the healer, and the child who had never truly been abandoned. Only protected until the right father was ready to find him. Dawn arrived quietly, for the first time in generations. No fear lingered over the Blackthorne Palace. The smoke had cleared, the wounded had been treated, the fallen had been honored. And beneath the same sky that had witnessed betrayal, hope returned. The grand hall of the Allied Kingdoms stood filled with Alpha Kings, Luna Queens, elders, and thousands of wolves from every realm. No one had gathered to witness a coronation. They had come to witness a promise. Kaelin stood beside Nolan wearing a simple midnight blue ceremonial cloak instead of heavy royal robes. The boy looked toward the crowd with the same quiet humility that had always defined him. He was still the child who fed abandoned wolf pups, still the boy who shared blankets before keeping one for himself. Power had changed nothing. Elder Garen stepped forward carrying the ancient crown of the first moon. The silver crown had remained untouched for centuries. He raised it high. "By the authority of every allied kingdom, we recognize Kaelin Blackthorne as the rightful heir of the first moon." A hush swept across the hall. The elder lowered the crown onto Kaelin's head. At that very moment, the crescent mark upon the boy's chest glowed once more. Nolan's mark answered immediately. Soft silver light filled the chamber. No explosion, no display of overwhelming power. Only warmth, only peace, one by one. Every Alpha King present bowed, then every Luna Queen, then every warrior.